All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to another show here on the roll call. Today's guest, we got Mr. John Bender, 1994 World Cup champion. Thank you for joining us, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jerry. Appreciate it. I always enjoy talking to you. I haven't seen you in a while either, so it's nice to see your pretty face again.
Thank you. Just a second. Give me just a second.
And it's nice meeting you too, Ray.
Yeah, nice meeting you, John.
I've watched a couple of these, and I've seen you with Jerry before, so I feel like I kind of know you because I've seen you on these things.
Yeah, they're always, exciting and fun to do, especially when we get a legend in like you.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, let me tell you guys a little bit of about John. John, he's straight up the World Cup champion, second World Cup champion. The first World Cup champion in the U.S. was Joe Rowe. Then back to back Ohio. Here comes John Bender and takes it the following year, 1994. So I pretty much started searching for John, and I got a hold of him, and I told him I wanted to go hang out with him. So he invited me over, and then just became good friends, right, John?
That's right. Yeah, I remember that phone call. It's pretty cool. Is this the John Bender that did the Pigeons? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you was talking about going up and seeing Tony, and you thought about you might stop by and see me on the way back at Tony Altoon.
Yeah.
You finally did get up there, didn't you?
Yeah, I haven't made it to Canada yet, but
I thought you had done that by now.
No, I haven't yet, but that's on the making here. So hopefully someday, you know what I mean? But yeah, so we ended up going out there, hanging out, and man, it was a trip, man. I enjoyed it, and that's the beauty about this hobby here. I got to, not only you are one of the founders of this pretty much interviews and podcasts. I've been following your video, that video. Remember you had that red or blue tank top with a mullet. And
back then, Carl Hardesty made a little video, and he had some pop bottles, and he set some back when we had glass pop bottles, and he set them pop bottles up, and he took some of his birds. Now Carl likes small birds, and he was using it. I forget how he went about it, but using the pop bottle, I guess, to give an idea about how big the birds were. And he did that, and I thought, man, that was pretty cool, because I'd met Carl. Joe Rowe had brought him over one time. I think at the time Carl was the president of the club, MBRC. So a little later on, I was watching a fishing show on TV, anglers catching bass and stuff. And I thought, man, I could probably do something like that, because it's just good old boys out in the boat fishing and talking about the different hooks and things. So I thought, man, I could do the same thing with pigeons. So between Carl's little video and that angler thing that I seen on TV, I thought, I'm going to give that a go. So I ended up shooting one, and it went over pretty good, and they wanted me to do another one, and I ended up doing the second one. I remember on that second one, it lasted 6 hours and 45 minutes. Yeah, it took a year to shoot it. In my first one, my cameraman would get a little irritated with me once in a while. I would say, Mr. Cameraman, while I was talking, if you wouldn't mind, he'd get mad because I wouldn't call him Jay. And so we bumped heads a couple of times. I thought, man, if I shoot another one, I'm going to have a different cameraman. So I got me another cameraman I could get along with a little better. And that Mr. Cameraman came from, remember Mr. Rogers' show? The dude who would talk to the kids. I'd sit and watch him, and he would say, now, Mr. Cameraman, and it was just a joke, but this guy couldn't take it. So
he couldn't take it.
No, he couldn't take it. My next cameraman was a pretty good dude, and he was also an angler, a bass fisherman named Jeff Snook. He passed away a couple years ago. I said, would you mind doing it? He was one of our club members. And I said, yeah, I would love for you to do it if you would. And he said, yeah, he'd do it. And I said, well, before we do, here's what I want you to do. If you would, I said, you ever watch Johnny Carson's show? He said, yeah. I said, you watch Johnny's guests when they come out. I said, they'll come out and they'll sit down and the cameraman will broaden back and he'll catch them both in there. I said, when Johnny asks him a question and the dude goes to answer, I said, the cameraman slowly zeroes in on the dude. And I said, when he's done answering, he'll widen back again. And I said, watch them when they come in. They'll have walkouts and walk-ins. I said, they do different things with the camera. They'll drop down on them. And so he sat and watched Johnny Carson for about a week, and he handled that camera real good after that. We had a good time doing that. We took those films, that second one. We had an old hollow block building built back in the late 40s, early 50s. I can't remember right off. It's in the book. And it needed a lot of attention. We needed a roof. We needed electrical. We decided we wanted to put siding on it. So we sold them videos all over the United States, and some went to Germany, England. Mike Tyson bought one that we thought that was pretty cool. We ended up, I think we made $8,000-9,000, and we took all that money and we put it back into our club, and we took and run new wiring, put a new roof on it. We had a big tree. We was always worried it was going to fall in the neighbor's house, so we had it cut down, and got us all squared away with them videos. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah.
We really enjoyed that.
I watched some videos over and over and over, and to where I'm into trying to learn a little bit of the genetics part of it, about the rolling part of it. I mean, you had it pretty good, man. And that was years ago.
It was fun. Man. Yeah. I spent a lot of time. I carried me a little clipboard around like Smitty does. And it made me smile. I watched Smitty do some interviews. The first one I seen Smitty do was with G. Will Stenhouse out in L.A. And he had his little clipboard and shit. And it reminded me exactly of me back in the day. I mean, since then, I've talked to Smitty, and we've conversed on the phone a few times. Pretty cool guy. Now, he's knowledgeable. He's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
But yeah, them videos were a lot of fun. Had a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Yeah, you got a lot of views for me, that's for sure. Have you
I had a buddy of mine. Buddy of mine, hey Jerry, buddy of mine bought one of those, and I worked with his wife over here where I work. And I said something to her one day, and she goes, "I'm so tired of hearing your voice." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Oh," I said, "that damn tape my husband bought." He said he's played it over like 3 times. 6 hours and 45 minutes, played it 3 times. I'd say she was tired of hearing my voice.
Yeah, no, and you know what? That's good. I mean, just to show you that something that has an interest for people, you get the support for it. I mean, and for what the earnings on that's good, man. Especially back in those days, man, they take you a long way.
I think we sold them, I think back then for $15 a tape, and we had to buy a new VCR. We had the one master. We'd pop it in. They would put a blank tape in, and that's how we did it. And I had a little note I had typed up, and then I had a bunch of them copied. I said, if you get time and you feel like it, I said, I'd like to have some feedback, if you enjoyed the video. And damn near everybody, I got a whole box full of thank you cards from people all over the world.
Oh, nice.
Little notes and stuff, how they like, it made me feel good. And
for sure.
I was hoping to teach somebody something, but at the same time, I've learned a whole lot more since then,
Yeah. No, that definitely inspired me to do what I'm doing, man. I was like, man, I want to do that.
Well, when I seen you the first time out in LA, I believe it was LA. It was LA or Arizona. He was out back messing with some bands. You were putting on some birds, and some guys were giving you a little grief. You called them your bling. You had like 2 bands on one leg and 2 on the other, and they were different colors. And I remember watching you, and you said, someday I'm going to go to school and learn how to do videos. And I connected with that when I heard you say that, Jerry. And then that's why. And then after that, I always followed you and paid attention to what you were doing. So I knew who you was when you called me. I'd already been tracking you. I'd already been watching you for a while.
Yeah, I was surprised how much you were like tuned in to what's going on, and you're out there in social media. Like, I won't hear much of you, but you're tuned into like everybody.
Yeah, I try to keep up on what's going on best I can. I was watching your birds here a couple of weeks ago. They look pretty good.
Yeah.
everything comes together. I was real proud of you too, man. After you come visit me and you went back, you ended up taking like 9th in the nation.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
I'm
hoping you have more luck with these birds you got.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry about drowning you out, but you got the right guy on here. I'll talk your leg off.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we say about these videos. You know, you get guys who's been around a long time, who's done well. They've got a lot more stories than we can ask about, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. Yes, sir. I have a bunch of them.
So
I have to be. I'm like Jerry, and I think most of us, we've read your book, you know, and we've all gotten something from it. And I was excited last night when Jerry, you know, sent me the text message saying that you were going to be on, and if I wanted to join, because I wanted to talk to you. I think I mentioned it to you earlier. You know, you won the World Cup. You know, can you tell us about that whole thing? Because I think you've done a lot of stuff in your life and you've been successful at it. And you just told us how you got into the pigeon thing, you know, into the interviews. But what led you and gave you the drive, you know, to really want to get to this level with pigeons, with the rollers?
You mean as far as competition goes?
As far as competition, yes.
Okay, as far as competition goes, we had a big group of, at one time, there was a lot of bird guides around here, kind of like mini England. You know what I mean? The pigeons were everywhere, and everywhere you went, you would run into pigeon guides. And so I ended up learning, talking to these old men, and I had some buddies my age. We'd ride bicycles, we'd go around, and we would talk to these old dudes. And then finally grew up right around 25. Me and one of these young guys I grew up with says, you know, we had a competition, which I wasn't aware of it. He said, we had a competition about 15 years ago. And he said, my brother-in-law won it. I said, is that right? He was always bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, hell, everybody was into dual purpose birds, showing birds. And they did tend to be a little big, but I was brought up in that in 4-H. So I was a show guy. But eventually I got into the rolling aspect of it. And we had a local guy named Bill Berry, who was my first mentor when I was little, told me how to basically feed them, keep them alive, you know, how to doctor them if they were sick, stuff like that. Now, that particular guy there had some spin, but he really looked at it all wrong. He was mostly a show guy, and he had more spin than the rest of the guys, but he was the kind of guy that thought roll downs were okay, bumpers were okay, never said anything about kidding, never said anything about style. But once in a while, at least one, he'd have one every year, and we'd all run up to Bill's house and watch it. Something that would go like 500-600 feet and last for a few months. And then finally it would get squashed out, you know. So eventually I had moved to Texas, and I came back and I wanted to get some working birds. I wanted to get some rollers. So I go up to Bill and I said, hey, Bill, you got anything to let go? And because as a kid, he would say, Bender, I got something for you. Come up here. And he'd give me a bird. And a lot of times they rolled. Most birds, like I said, didn't roll, but Bill would give me some good birds once in a while, or better than what was really going around. Anyhow, he said, no, John, he said, don't have anybody. He said, there's this guy named Joe Rowe, lives out in Willersburg, and which was about 10 miles from where we were. And he said, you might be able to get some off of him. So I got directions off of him, and Bill said he'd call him. And I went out there, knocked on his door, and a redheaded guy, and I used to have red hair, and he wasn't real friendly. He wanted to know what I wanted. And I said, well, you know, I heard you had some good working birds, and I wanted to come and take a look at them. And I mainly wanted to see if you had any to let go. Well, long story short, we ended up becoming friends. First time I ever watched his birds, he did invite me to go back that day, and we watched him. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, it just rained rollers. I'd never seen anything like it, and it stayed with me the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So I thought, this is the guy. So I tried to get a bird off of him, and he wouldn't let me have one. Then finally, before I left, he said, here. And he reached up and he snatched one off his loft, and his thing is loose. He had about 100 birds out, and I remember how impressed I was with how he could catch a wild bird just, well, it wasn't wild, but, a loose bird just right now. Mm-hmm. He handed me a red grizzle, and I learned later in the years he hated red grizzles. So that's why he gave me this red grizzle. Anyway, I took it home, not knowing that rollers have to be certain ages before they come into the roll. I flew the bird and it didn't roll. Hell, it might have needed a couple more months, but I thought, I gave me a dud. But I know where the good ones are. So I kept going back, and little bit at a time, he got used to me and we became friends. Then he taught me about, one day we're standing in the yard and he says, I said, man, they really look good. And he says, do they? And I said, yeah. And he said, which is the best one up there? I said, hell, they all look the same to me. He said, precisely. He said, there's a best one in there. I said, well, how do you tell? He said, well, you tell by the wing and you tell by the speed of the bird. And it took me a while to get the hang of it. Just about every time I went to this guy's house, Ray, I left with a headache. My head would really hurt because I was really trying to understand, and I'd never heard this kind of stuff. I'd always heard about cover feather, mm-hmm. Nice big heads, how that kill's supposed to be, all the show stuff. So this was a whole different world for me. So anyway, hanging around with him, and then going back to this other guy that said, my brother-in-law won a flying competition 15 years ago. I kind of thought I was getting the hang of it at that time. And I said, well, why don't we try to get another one going? And he said, well, so we went around and we talked to everybody we could talk to. We probably talked to 20, 25 guys. Nobody wanted to fly. So I knew Joe pretty well at that time, and we stopped over at his house. And he said, what you guys been doing? I said, well, we was trying to get a fly going, but nobody wants to fly. And he says, well, hell, I'll fly with you. And she said, me and you and Donnie, that's three of us. We could have a fly with three. I said, okay. When everybody found out Joe Rowe was flying, then now everybody wanted to fly because Joe's flying. Okay, well, that's good. So everybody flew. And that's how we got into it. And then with the egos, you know how that goes. Yeah. We just kept wanting to do it. So eventually we was having a local fly every year. At the end of the year, we'd have a fly, and the rules was it had to be that year's birds. And I won most of them. Out of about 8 to 12 of them, I won. I think I won about 8 of them. I won most of them. So I was doing pretty good. Then I thought I would try Paul Vaughn Invitational. MBRC was sponsoring that thing. So I got in that. I thought I would do good. I didn't. I think it's like 64th, something like that. When you have a loss, it about kills you. Yeah. And it makes you try harder the next time. So I kept trying harder. Eventually, while we were doing that, I heard they was having a World Cup competition. Said, yeah, we had one last year. A guy named Peter Harper from England won that. Oh, no, excuse me. Monty Nibel, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. Let's see if I wrote that down somewhere. Yeah, Monty Nibel won that first one. Mm-hmm. Then the next year, Peter Harper won it. Well, that was the year I decided I was going to try it. My birds really did look good, Ray, but they landed in 14 minutes. About like what happened to our last national champion. Just landed a little bit early. We had a guy named smoked a pipe, Joe Marlette, real nice fella. And he was my judge that day. I was trying to qualify. And it embarrassed me and it bummed me out. And he says, Bender, don't feel bad. He said, from what I could see, you could be a world champion. He said, you just needed a little bit more time. He said, so you hang in there. I thought, well, okay, that's all I needed. I just needed that little bit of extra. And so the next year I qualified. I believe I took first during the qualifiers in our region and placed 10th in the world. At the same time, when I placed 10th, that's when Joe Rowe won it. Nice. Joe Rowe was the first world champion. He was the number 3 world champion, first one in the United States. Then when you're a world champion, you can't compete the next year. That the reason they set that up basically so they could get a judge, you know, you can go judge after you win. So the next year, I was thinking, man, if I could just get better than top 10, you know, just better than, you know, 10th, I would be happy. And they had a judge named George Kitson come over from England, and along with Les Valance, I believe is how you spell his last name or pronounce it. And English guys, pretty cool. Love to hear them talk. Sound like the Beatles. Pretty cool. And they stayed all night, and got up next morning and flew. And these guys were tight, man. It was the point. They were, you know, I'd see a big full break look like or close to it, and they'd say 5. Yeah. Another big break, 5. Joe started getting a little irritated, and I said, no, man, they're just tight judges. Just, you know, let it go. Well, long story short, even though they was that tight, I think I ended up with a 200 and still won the world championship with 200. You know, they were really good judges. George Kitson, when he passed, they wrote a piece on George that said he was the best roller judge that ever lived. And I thought, well, he was tough. He was. But couldn't talk to a nicer guy. Really, yeah. I really enjoyed both of them guys. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's about the you know, the score that that they pretty much have over there. It's not they don't have no outrageous score like over 400. You know, they're
pretty conservative. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty picky on what they what they judge. You know.
You know. And I've thought about that a lot over the years. You get a guy what they would call loose judge, and then you get a guy what they would call a tight judge. Mm-hmm. As long as he's consistent, the cream should come to the top. Everything should be okay. Yeah. But I know it raises a few eyebrows when we get these big scores like Gabriel got on the 11 and like McCormick got on the 20. It raises some eyebrows, but we're doing the best we can over here, and it's working.
Well, you guys have one of the biggest clubs in the United States there for quite some time, right?
Back in the day, yeah. We was a hotbed of rollers, yeah.
Yeah, you guys had a hotbed there, so I remember that. I was a kid back then.
Well, we'd have a show. We had them local shows down here, and we had, I think, the largest in the country. I think, you know, it's a couple thousand birds in these shows. Wow. And big time judges. And Wally Fort, a Hall of Famer, lived up north of us, and he would come down a lot, especially on our flies. All the guys from up north, when we had our local flies, just our young bird flies would come down because we'd put on some pretty good shows. Then we had Walter Harder. I think he was up north, not in the same club, though. He came down. I think he ended up getting in the Suncoast Roller Club. Walter Harder was a big roller fanatic. But Ron Banks, Jimmy Sherwood. We had a big football player out of Canada. He come over to visit us one time, flew birds out of Canada. But, yeah, we had a lot of interested people would come by. We have people coming from all over the place to come see us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how you know, you got this guy Pensum coming over from England and landing in California, and then you guys are way up south, you know what I mean, and you guys became a hotbed of rollers over there, you know what I mean. It's crazy, and back there it was all about, you know, writing a letter and, you know,
yeah, it wasn't no phone calls. It was too expensive. We wrote letters back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. There's, you know, you have the long distance calls, so you couldn't be too long on the phone. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Lot of letters. Yeah.
So how was it to to excuse me, Ray, but how was it that it got to the point I guess you became good friends with Joe to where you're able to open up that kit box on that day from, right?
Oh, the day he won?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He says, John, I got to work. He said, would you mind opening up the box and flying him? Because we just lived, I could probably pick a rock up and throw it really, really hard 3 or 4 times, and I'd be at Joe's house. I mean, that's how close he lived to me.
Wow.
So I was always at his house. He was always at mine. I rented a house off of Joe. When I met Joe after a couple of years, he said, I bought me a new house. He said, I saved up a bunch of money, and if I died, my wife and my son would blow it all. He said, I'm going to enjoy some of it. He said, I seen a house I want to buy. I said, well, go get it. And he did. But it was just up the road. Real nice house. Big pool out back. But anyway, I went up there and I hung with Joe all the time for about 8 years. I spent about 8 years with him. And anyway, he wanted me to fly his birds for him on that fly. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So we went up there and there was a whole yard full of guys. I think that's when he had like 58 breaks. It was crazy. And I think that a couple years after that, when he flew again in 95, Richard Miller released the birds for him that time. Monty Nibel was the judge that year. I think that's the year Don Ouellette won. I think George Mason took second. Joe Rowe took third that year. But yeah, the year he won, I flew the birds for him. And Norm Reed out of California, he was the judge then. He stayed all night over at my house. And I didn't know George was a diabetic. He said, hey, man, come here. And I said, yeah. He said, see this needle? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm going to throw this in your pen. He said, I'm going to take a shot. He said, I didn't want you to think I was some kind of drug addict or something. And I said, okay. Norm was a good guy. I like Norm. Norm should have had a scribe, though. Norm was doing it all by himself. One of the guys offered to scribe, and he said no. And he might have missed a few breaks. Yeah, Joe's birds really looked good that day. They really did. So he became world champion, and then I took 10th that same year.
Oh, nice.
We was 2 pretty happy campers that year. Yeah.
Wow. So you were flying Joe's family, same family, right?
About 50%.
About 50.
Yeah, Joe met Carl and at the Louisville show and got to talking to him. And when you go to the Louisville show, have you ever been to it, Ray?
Yes, I have.
Well, you know how they go to the show and then they go around to the guys' houses, they fly the birds. Well, he went around when he got to Carl's house. He said, man, I really like that guy's birds. He said, I'm going to try to get some off of him. So he did. And Joe already had a pretty good family. He called them his old blacks. Even though they weren't all black, he called them his old blacks because he had a lot of them. But he thought he could merge them 2 families and produce a better family. He said, in all honesty, at the time, he thought Carl's birds was a little bit too hot. But he wanted some of that velocity that Carl had because Carl's birds really had some good rotation when they went into the performance. Anyway, and it worked. He produced a real good line of birds, the Joe Rowe birds, and I had some of them. And at the same time, I have a passion for solid black birds and also solid white birds. So I thought, well, I got these going, and while I'm messing with these, I'm going to start a family of blacks. I'm going to start a family of whites, solid selves. And I went and got all the white birds I could find from anybody that let one go, and I raised 60. And out of them 60, only 20 of them was pure white, and the rest of them had a little bit of red on them. I just went ahead and got rid of any of them that had red on them, kept the pure white ones, and I started a family off of them that turned out pretty good. The only drawback on them was they was just a little bit big for what I like. I like a small bird, but they performed really well. On the blacks, I went around and found all the solid blacks I could find, and I took blue check self Hardesty birds and bred them to those. Man, they turned out good. So I had my own whites, my own blacks, and then I had Joe Rowe, some of Joe Rowe's stuff. And that's what I was using. when I won the thing, I think six or eight of my solid blacks, it's in the book, was in that. One of my whites. At the same time, I had a buddy that had a bunch of jackanet birds, got them straight from Richard. And so I was over there watching his birds fly, and he had two up there. Joe taught me, when you go to a guy's house, look for the best bird. That was what that little story was all about the other day. I was telling you when he said, what's the best one up there? And I said, I didn't know. He said, well, if you go to a guy's house and they all land on the roof, and he says, pick you out a bird. He said, wouldn't you want the best bird? And I said, well, yeah, I never really thought of that. He said, well, you're not going to know if you didn't already spot it in the sky, right? I said, okay. So then that's when I started paying attention to wing patterns and how often and how deep they roll and all that. So anyway, went to Bobby's house watching his birds roll. He had a black motto up there. It was a real smoker and a dark tortoise grizzle hen. The motto was a cock. A tortoise grizzle was a hen. I had to have him, and he's a pretty good old boy, and he sold him to me. Well, when I was getting my World Cup team together, they were in there. My blacks, that one white, some of Joe Rose stuff, and some mixed stuff. Now back then it was a big deal. Everybody thought if you're going to do well, they have to be a real tight family. It kind of messed people up when I done that, because there was a lot of them weren't related to each other at all, but they just harmonized good and they worked good. I was just good at picking the right ones, evidently.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to have a pure family to win. You really don't. You just have to have a good eye, and you got to fly them regular, and you can do just fine. A lot of these guys like to chastise people because they get a bird here and get a bird there. As long as you know what you're doing, you're okay. You know.
Right.
And I might have forgotten what the question was. Did I answer it at all? Did I ever get around to it?
You did. You did.
Okay.
You did.
I get a little windy. I lose my place sometimes.
No, I mean it's pretty exciting to hear, you know, because back in the day there were a number of areas in the United States that were hotbeds that had lots of guys flying rollers compared to today. But you guys have consistently stayed hot. You may have lost members here and there, but you still have a lot of good flyers in your area. And
we're rebuilding right now. We are rebuilding. We have lost a lot of old guys, and the club has kind of went by the wayside. We don't have the building anymore. But Gabriel got into this a few years ago, and he wanted to strengthen Ohio back up, and he's doing a remarkable job. And in the middle of that, become national champion and also broke the record. 702. I think average is something like 4. And he got clear up to 702. So he's doing pretty good. He's eat up with it really bad, kind of like I used to be. Like G Will is. G Will's got it really bad. I like watching him because he reminds me of me when I was going through this stuff. I think G Will's going to cause a lot of damage. Then I spotted this guy in Ireland.
Mick.
Yeah, Mick.
Yeah.
He got a hold of me, and we got to talking back and forth. He'll be another one we're going to have to watch for. And Jerry, I'm telling you, man, from what I seen of your birds a while back, if you get shit right, you're going to be okay too, man. Your birds are really looking good.
Yeah.
I just need the luck to be with me, and then I'll be all right. We got to go.
Rick Mead had a buddy named Ox. It wasn't Peter. But anyway, I was watching his birds on there one day, and they looked real good. And here, a few weeks ago, there's a guy named John in Canada, Kuzo. Have you ever heard of him, Jerry?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, his birds was looking pretty good. I've seen him on there. There's some good flyers out there, man. There's some good birds out there. Yeah. But if you're going to do good, basically, you got to have good birds first.
Yeah.
And then know how to fly them and feed them properly, and you'll get the most out of them. Because you can have good birds, but if you don't know how to feed them and fly them, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
If you know how to feed them and fly them, but you don't have good birds, you're not going to get anywhere. So,
well, it's very. I've gone to realize that it's not just about opening the kit box. It's like it's like a mixed martial arts. I mean, like you gotta get in the octagon with different people that are from different types of fighting and stuff. So it's the same thing right here. You got people at different weather conditions, different everything, different birds. So it's pretty much what you train them to do, and how do you realize that what you do is gonna work, and put that up against someone else just like you. You know what I mean? It's like it's an art, you know what I mean? And that's one thing about your book, man. Those of you who haven't seen his book right here, this is his book right here. And it's the Pigeon Trainer and the Birmingham Roller, and it tells you like step by step. You got preparing your birds for competition week by week, preparing for fly. I mean, things like this is what is going to get you there. You know what I mean? Because if you don't have a guidance, then you're pretty much guessing. So John, props on this book right here, man. You got top
I
guys.
appreciate it.
You got top guys in England saying this is the best book.
That made my day. That did. It really did. You like that kind of feedback with Mick? That's how I met Mick. He got a hold of me and was telling me that the book helped him, and had a guy from West Virginia here not too long ago saying the book helped him, and that kind of makes it worth the 5 years I sat there. It's like Ray was talking earlier with moving and trying to fly these birds. Mm-hmm. When you're working, you only got so much time, right, Ray?
Yeah.
So and then when you're writing a book, you have to be in the mood, and then a lot of times you get in the mood and you sit down to do the thing, and you got disturbances, kids playing, dogs barking, things, you just can't focus, And then there's other days you sit down to write and you get this, what they call writer's block. You can't think of nothing,
Yeah.
Then other days you'll be at work and have an epiphany. Oh man, that would be, I need to put that in there. So I tried to take my time, but at the same time, the publisher's on me all the time. What are you doing now? What have you done? Have you wrote anything? I did a couple pages. But to put all that time and effort in it, and then you put it out, it's like turning your child loose. You hope everybody likes them, right? Yeah. And I've been getting some really good feedback, and it's been worth it. Yeah, but my whole idea on that was to just kind of, when I sit down there to do it, this publisher, it was a little karate kid, and he growed up, and he real famous. He said, "Hey man, I own a publishing company too, among all these other things." He said, "Oh, you met him? You met Jamie Vandera? Remember him?"
Yeah, yes. The guy that breaks the glass.
Yeah. So he talked me into doing a book, and originally he wanted me to do one on martial arts because I'd been in martial arts for a long time, and that's how he met me. And he wanted me to do one on martial arts. And then I asked him, "Well, what about would the pigeon thing work out?" And he said, "Yeah, we can do that." So we did the pigeon thing, and he was real supportive. And if it wasn't for him, I'd have never got it out there. But my whole idea was, when I sat down, was if I was a new guy, what would I want to look at to help me save some time and save some money? And then that's what I ended up with. This here will help you save time and save money. Now, back to what you were saying, Jerry. There's not a set pattern for anything. Mm-hmm. If you just get one thing out of here that puts you a level above where you were, it's worth the book. Yeah. But everything in this book, pretty much, I had to pile together to help me win the World Cup. So yeah. I tried to do it in that way. What I did to get me there. At the same time, what is it do I think they need to bring them up to a higher level? Yeah. And when you get a guy like Mick out of Ireland doing as good as he done, I guess I did okay.
Well, it puts you in the idea of what needs to be done, versus not knowing where you need to be at. You know what I'm saying? So my understanding from what I got off your book, it keeps me on like in the middle to where, if I need to condition them up for fly, I'm able to understand how to do it, or do I need to break them down and do it? So it's not pretty much telling you that this is where you need to be to win. It's just an idea. It's a view of where you need to be at
Yeah,
to be able to control things.
exactly. And at the same time, I try to give them options. Now, I say, I do this, but some guys do this and some guys do that. So
Yeah.
then they can say, well,
Yeah.
this here looks more appealing to me,
Yeah.
instead of saying this is how it's got to be.
Yeah.
Me and Marlon Garnett used to talk on the Mad Max show. And he's not a big believer in books, but which is fine. He thinks you just get out there and get your hands dirty, get your feet wet. It's the best way to go. Well, that does help. But if you think about it, when you go to school to learn about life and learn about everything that exists, what do they hand you? A book. You got to have somewhere to start, right? Yeah. So this is a starting point, and it's got a lot of options, and it's a big time saver. It really is.
Yeah, no,
but
and
yeah,
it's something. Yeah, it's something like you read the book, and then you're in your yard, you're flying your pigeons, and all of a sudden you notice something that you read on the book, and there you go, oh, that's what he meant about it. You know what I mean? So it kind of helps you out to where you come to that point. You remember, like, oh man, that's what he was talking about. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. Aside from this book, there's other books, and there's a lot of good things in other books too. I'm just really pleased that mine is up to par with the rest of the books. But it's basically like what you said earlier, Jerry. There's where you live and what kind of birds you got, and then how you think. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I kind of say it's like putting your own little puzzle together. What works for you might not work for somebody else, but there's something in there that will work for you, and you got to find it, And if you don't experiment a little bit, it'll set you back. You want to listen to people, but if you try to listen to everybody, you're not going to get anywhere. You got to listen to people, and you got to see what you think makes sense for you, and then give it a try. It's either going to work or it's not. And if it does, I'm a big advocate for writing down notes. You fly your bird, you write notes. And then here's what'll happen. Gabriel called me one day and he says, oh man, you wouldn't believe it. The birds were the best I ever saw in my life. And I said, well, you peeked them out. There's a potential in a bird. It can only get so good. Well, if you're feeding it regular and flying it and stuff, if you cut that feed back a little bit, or if you change that feed a little bit, you can get a bird to peek out. Okay. The birds look wonderful that day. You go on the house and you're done. You go back out the next day and they're still looking good, but not quite what they were. Now, in a week or two, you think, man, 2 weeks ago, these birds were beautiful. They'd have knocked your socks off. Well, that goes back to Gabe. I said, hey, Gabe, you peeked them birds out. I said, you've been taking notes like I told you? He goes, yeah. I said, well, anytime you want to get there, go back on your notes a couple of weeks and see how you got there, because that should work for you every time. Well, he did. Gabriel's really getting the work out of them birds. And it's like you. I mean, you talked about taking notes. Your birds look pretty sharp too, Jerry. But if you take notes, and if you accidentally hit it and you've been taking notes, you'll know how you got there. The worst thing is to have a bird's the best you ever saw and not know how you done it. Yeah. There's nothing worse than that.
I've been.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I've been talking to Dave Mosley in England, and I'm just not telling him. I know, like, I didn't tell him, like, all right, I've gone through this already with John Bender here, in his book. But man, he exactly what you said, he said, and I was like, man, this dude's in another part of the world, what I mean, dealing with the same pigeons, and this dude's over here, and they talk about this. You talk about the fly condition, and they're flying for hours, and then you want to bring them down to where they're around 40 minutes, and that's when you get more activity. And I was like, man, it's the real deal, what I mean, and learning how to You do get your birds there, like you say in your book. You know, you're gonna have how'd you say it? Something like a a bit better chance to win if that person doesn't have his birds at
Oh,
30 minutes. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think I made a comment in there. A guy says, he says, if I have to break my birds down or starve my birds to get them to roll, I ain't doing that. And I think, well, okay, you'll be easy to beat.
Yeah. So yeah, so
Anybody that won't cut their birds back on the feed, they're going to be too heavy. They're not going to be as frequent. Now,
yeah.
here's the deal. He said, if I got to cut the feed back on my birds to get them to roll, you know, he didn't like that. Well, here's the thing. When you got a team of birds, they already roll.
Yeah.
They already roll. You wouldn't have them in that team, right? All
Mhm.
you're doing when you cut the feed back a little bit, you're shaving some fat off of them. And when you do that, you're going to cause them to be more frequent. Now, you know as well as I do, that's how you get your points. The more frequency you got, more points you're going to get. Now, there's a limit to it. If you keep your birds on point, or what I call peaked out, some people say on point, either way is fine. But if you keep them there too long, that fat that has been absorbed, they're going to start working on the muscle. And when they start working on the muscle to live, then your roll is going to deteriorate. So you can take some birds and you can get them peaked out, but if you keep them too lean too long, they're going to look like a bunch of rags, bunch of mops falling out of the sky. Well, that's when you got to go back the other way. You got to get them fattened back up. The best way I ever got the work out of mine is get them strong first. Now, I already know they roll. I already picked them. I know they roll. So you get them strong first and then gradually cut the feed down. And then gradually is the key. As you gradually cut that down, your time will come down. The height on your birds will come down. The frequency will come up. The wings, believe it or not, even get higher.
Yeah.
The depth on your birds, will you even get more depth? When you get your birds right from just normal flying, you get them peaked out, you're going to get higher wing, you're going to get more depth, you're going to get more frequency. What more would you want? You know, that's what you need to win. But my point is, if you keep them there too long, it'll deteriorate. So it's a constant up, constant down. A lot of guys think they can just keep them right here all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and they might still look pretty good, but if I had the same birds and I cut the feed back a little gradually, I can knock him off. See?
Yeah.
So,
No, and that's how you mentioned on your book that is not just in feed, and you got to condition the bird. The bird's gotta you got to go from maybe it all depends on what the birds are telling you. I mean, they might be flying an hour 40 minutes. You say in your book, maybe you got to fly them twice a day. You know what I'm saying, to bring them
yeah.
down. So it's all, who knows? Maybe the last day of fly in your competition, you get wins and they fly for 3 hours when you wanted them at one. And now what you got to do? You got to probably feed them up and rest them, because rest is very important too. And
Yeah, it's a combination of feed, rest, and exercise. Them three things right there. Now, if they're too fat, you ain't going to be able to get them off the roost, and they're going to breathe heavy and all this and that. Yeah, we're talking about taking birds that can fly good and make them fly. Get an hour and a half, 2 hours out of them, you're okay. But you want to start that cutting back stuff about 2 weeks before. Give yourself about 14 days. Say, I'm flying on this day right here. Count back 14 days. Start your cutting then, and you'll be okay. Now, where guys screw up on that cutting, at least from my opinion, everybody's got their own way. This is on my way. No grit, no vitamins, none of that. If you're going to cut with the feed that you got. Don't be adding vitamins. Don't be adding grit, because that just makes them stronger again. The vitamins and minerals and everything that's in the grit, what you're trying to do is weaken them down. If you get them vitamins and minerals while you're cutting the feed, you're really not getting anywhere.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Now in the cutting, that's a gradual thing, right? I mean, I've seen guys like go overboard with the cutting, it's gradual, right?
That's the key. That's the key word, Ray, and it is gradual. It's got to be gradual, because if you shock them, you're going to mess everything up. They won't even want to fly.
Right.
There's two ways of peaking your birds out, best I can figure.
Mm-hmm.
One is gradually bring them down till they won't hardly go. Boost them with the proper seeds that you think is going to do it. Let them set for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that last meal is about 14, 16 hours, has plenty of time to digest. And that's what I call catching them on the way up, boost. Mm-hmm. Or you can peak them out on the way down.
Yeah.
In other words, if you got time, you get out there with your birds, you get a good, strong, healthy group of birds that work. Cut that feedback for 2 weeks. Take a note every day. Find out what day them birds really look their best. Maybe it ain't 14 days for you. Maybe it's 10 days for you, right? Mm-hmm. Should work every time after that. Anytime you wanted them birds, if you got to get them in that same condition, cut that feedback on that day that you've seen they look the best. They'll probably look that good again. They'll only hold that for 2 or 3 days. That really brilliant. But a lot of guys never even see birds peaked out.
Yeah.
They say, well, them birds really look good, but they ain't really seen them peaked out. Peaked out will just blow your mind if you hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's what I'm saying. It's this is an art, man. You know what I mean? And it's like when you nail it, man. Sometimes, you know, like you say, you don't keep your notes, man. You're like, man, how the heck did that happen? You know, and that's when people you say
that's the worst feeling in the world. Yeah.
That's when you say, man, the best performance is in your backyard where no one's there. You know what I mean? Well, you know, you did something that could have made it, you know, keep on.
Yeah, I mean, you could have ran in the house and looked at your notes, and you'd had a good opportunity to do that again, or awful close to it. You know, we was talking about that 40 minutes, Jerry.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I think George Mason's all that, the Godfather, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching him years ago, and he was talking about peaking birds out. He says, as close as you can get to that 20-minute mark, the more work rate you're going to get out of your birds. Now, that was like what Ray mentioned. It has to be gradual. Mm-hmm. But as close as you can get to that 20 minutes, the most work rate you're going to get out of them birds. Now, saying that, the first year I tried to get in the World Cup and I missed it by a minute, my birds were brilliant. But I was working 20 minutes. I thought this is never going to happen to me again. I'm going 40 minutes. So I went 40 minutes. I trained all my birds for 40 minutes after that and really kicked some ass. But if I would take them down from 40 to 20, they would even been better. But when you go to 20, you're always that chance you're going to land early. It depends on the temperature. If it's a little bit too hot, might take too much out of them, seeing they're going to land. So just give yourself a safety margin. If you really want to be a gambler, get them as close to that 20 minutes as you can and hope for a cool time slot. You know, if the weather's cool, you might be able to hit it. But you want to judge them on that last time you flew them. How much feed you think you really need to give them to get you there, you know?
Yeah, and the weather is important too, because if it's too warm and they're too active, they're not gonna lift, and they're gonna be cranking at a low altitude, man. You got a chance, you know, for them to not make 15 minutes, you know.
That's where the qualifiers. Yeah, if you got a lot of guys in the qualifiers, you're not going to get an early morning fly time. You want an early morning fly time if you get it. Now, if you made it to the finals, you pretty well figure you're going to fly early in the morning.
Yeah,
you can really cause some damage. But if you fly in at 1 o'clock in the middle of the day and it's hot and it's summer, and you might as well, you know, it's really going to be tough to qualify.
Yeah, they're not going to get that lift they need, you know.
Yeah,
well, you know, we were talking about. I mean, you were saying DQ. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I think we've all done it, and I think maybe that's probably one of the things that I felt the worst about DQing.
It about kills you, don't it?
You know, and I'm thinking the whole time after, this is never going to happen again. It's never going to happen again.
Just allow yourself a little more time. And let's just say the weather is correct. The weather is going to be okay. But how close do you want to get to that 20? You want to get 30? Or do you want to get 40? You know, or do you want to shoot for 20? Do you want that last flight to be 20 minutes? You're gambling with the closer you get to it. But if they do the time, you're really going to get the score. Yeah.
We
You know,
get
the other thing you
impatient.
said that's very important that I'm hoping everybody picks up on with all this, when you put all that together, observation is a big deal. I mean, I don't know how often I've gone to flies or went to visit guys where there's other people there and they're not watching the birds. Even the owner, they're not, you know, and I'm like, what? How do you know what they're doing? You know, how do you know? How do you keep notes if you're not watching your birds, you know? How do you know, you know? And even with young birds, you know, when birds start to come on, you know, I mean, how do you know what's good in there if you're not watching them? You know, you might see them on a pass by, you know, you're coming through with water, you know, you're changing water or something, you know, and you see them on a pass by, but hell, you don't know what else they're doing the fly. You know, you just see that one little moment, you know.
Here's what a lot of guys do, and I'd say 90% of them do it, right? They'll go out and they'll throw the birds out. Then they'll go around and they'll check the babies and they'll feed and they'll get their water ready and this and that. Don't see nothing. Don't see anything. That's what a lot of them do. Here's what I do when I'm serious. I go in and I feed everything that's not flying, water everything that's not flying, get everything done. As soon as my birds go out, I already know what I'm going to feed them. As soon as they're out, I set my feed trays in there. So when I'm done watching them, they'll go right in when they see that feed, right? They just come right in. But I get everything done first, because if you don't see nothing. And on top of that, while you're in there piddling around, the BOP is taking care of business, right?
I said a comment a while back that I'm the type of guy that I prep my coffee first, brew it, then go outside with the coffee cup, and you know, I'm not the guy that lets the birds out and then goes inside and gets the cup.
But if no one ever mentions that, ever points it out, you might not even think about it on your own. But if somebody points it out, you'll go, well, yeah, that makes sense. You know, it's just little stuff. It's a whole bunch of little stuff that adds up in a big way.
Well, that's the thing about your book. That's what's so great about it. It's got all these things in it. Like you said, it's such a good guide. You know, you may tweak things here and there. You may have heard something else you might want to try, but at least you've got a guide. You know, because if you don't, you know, like Jerry said, you know, you're kind of guessing, you know, without the observation, all the other things that you mentioned, you know, you're guessing. And
I got a good story for you, Ray. You know, whenever Joe Rose all the time, after he won the World Cup, people was always trying to buy his birds. They did me the same way. It's really hard to hang on to your birds because they offer you crazy money. And anyway, I go over there to see my buddy, Joe, and there's 6 or 8 guys in the yard, and they're flying birds. And finally, you know, I don't know what kind of deals they made, but everybody left with birds except for one guy. And I said, Joe, that one guy said he didn't have no birds. I said, didn't he want anything? And he said, yeah, he wanted some. I said, well, why didn't you let him have anything? And he goes, well, John was out back. I said, you know, I just won the World Cup. He said, I got some of the best birds in the world, right? And I said, well, yeah. He said, every guy in the backyard, Joe was real observant. He said every guy in the backyard was watching the birds except this one guy. And he said all he wanted to do was talk. And he said, you know, I only got so many birds to spare. And he said, if guy just wants to talk, I can tell right now he's not going to make a good bird man. So he said, I wouldn't sell him. He wouldn't sell him no birds just because he didn't look up, you know. Yeah. He just stand around. If you wasn't looking at them birds, you was on the downside.
You're on the downside.
Well, I've gotten put on check by a couple guys. for not looking up. And you know what, it's, I could see why, and it's disrespectful too, you know what I mean? Like,
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, sure,
you know?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
hell,
that's why you're there.
yeah, anybody can go out back and talk. But yeah, if you're going to talk, here's how me and Joe always talk. I'd go to visit Joe. We'd both have our heads back, talking, never look at each other, but we would talk while we was looking up. We'd stand almost shoulder to shoulder, and we would talk watching birds. I had to smile the other day. Jerry posted a picture, and over there in England, everybody was looking at the camera except for George Mason. What was George doing? George was looking up, watching the birds fly. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
he put me on my spot too a few times. It was like, one time I put down the camera, and I was getting my phone to film some on my phone, but at the time that I was getting the phone, he's turned around and looked at me, walked right at me. He goes, why aren't you filming this? I said, he's like, this is one of the best kits that we've seen so far. I said, I'm coming up with my phone. He goes, all right, get it on camera. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that guy in the rain, man, he's like you see water coming down his face, and he just like that, man. I'm like, I'm not shriveling, like. He
Yeah.
goes, he wouldn't even look at me. He goes, what's wrong? You're cold? I was like, man, this dude's like, he's a real bird roller man. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
Gabriel, my cousin Gabe, Gabe, he called me one time and he says, this was a few years ago. He got back into it. And he said, what does it really take to win like that? And I said, well, Gabe, you got to stand out there with them. You got to watch them. That's the main thing. I said, cold weather. Oh, I'd fly in anything. You don't want to fly in snow. I'd fly in the wind. I'd fly when it was cold. I'd fly when it was hot. But I remember I said, there's lots of times I've just stood there and just shook and shook until them birds come down. I said, that's the kind of dedication that other guys are doing. If you're not doing it, they're doing it,
yeah.
So that's what he does now. He stands out there and he studies them real hard, and it makes a difference. You know that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be what you got right now with your birds if you wasn't sitting there studying them.
Yeah.
That's one thing I liked about you, Jerry. You're very studious of your birds. You're a good observer, and you watch and you listen to all these guys. But I get to thinking sometimes with all these guys that you've talked to and all the different ways that you've heard this stuff, does it get a little confusing sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I like I said, like for example, talking to you, reading your book, it just gives me the understanding of where I need to be at. But in reality, it comes down to what I need to do in my backyard for the pigeons that I'm flying, for the weather that I'm flying. Well, like Ray said, you have a guideline, and everybody's
Yeah.
guideline is about the same. You know, they're
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
their differences are for where they at and what they got to do.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the same. And you know what? That's why I guess this book right here, it's a good understanding to those who are deep into this hobby or sport, where they recognize this is a guideline right here. Like when I went to Ireland, before the first time I met Kevin McKinney and Mick. He told me, he goes, hey, John Bender, his book is real good. Him and Kevin McKinney talking about your book. And I was like, man, these dudes would recognize it. And then here I go to England, and George asked Trevor Slater. He goes, hey, Trev, tell him what's the best book. And they're like, they're trying to guess, and they John Bender. And I'm like, man, he goes, I go, it's a good book, huh? Yeah. So this is the guideline, guys, right here. Bam. If you don't have one, a copy, go get it.
I was going to title it a different title. Originally, it was going to say the trainer and the Birmingham Roller. But my publisher said, no, man, you got to put Pigeon in there somewhere, because he said, they look it up, it's a Pigeon book. So that's when I put the Pigeon. Originally, it was the trainer and the Birmingham Roller, but we changed it to the Pigeon and the Pigeon trainer and the Birmingham Roller.
No, it's definitely a good book, and like I said, it doesn't get me confused to hear what other people. It just I like to hear it what they're doing because
Everybody's got a lot of
yeah,
differences, don't
yeah,
they? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I
basically,
said it's
yeah,
like a mixed martial arts type of thing. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own different ways. You get in the octagon and you get to do different maneuvers or whatever to win. It's the same
yeah.
thing. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
just think
Me and
about
Matt,
it. Just in the United States alone, weather-wise, our conditions can all be so much different on the same day. I
Yeah,
mean, the United States is so
yeah,
big,
yeah,
and um, I a lot of guys think the good, beautiful, sunny day is the best time to fly, and it's not for me.
yeah,
Actually it's the worst time to put birds up. They don't do anything here, on a beautiful sunny day. They don't. I
yeah,
get a good cloudy day, low cast, and it's not good weather for me, but man, the birds like that. They like it here.
yeah,
That.
Ray, Ray, the day I won, that's what it was like. It was a
Uh-huh.
cloudy, overcast day. Yeah, worked
yeah.
out real good for me. Hmm.
Yeah. See, like me, right here is, I like a nice little cool morning for them to get the lift because
Uh-huh.
in the hot
Uh-huh.
weather they could get so active, but they don't lift and they're too low. Man, I got birds. It's sketchy. You know what I mean? Like seeing them deep and fast, and you got 2-story homes around, and so it could be the bad time for me. To have a 80 degrees, 90 degrees. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
The
different
best
for
mine,
everybody.
yeah, in my area, the best mine always done was 65 degrees and below.
Nice.
Yeah, 65 and below, I was okay. If I could stay below 65, I'm okay. I get up in around here, close to the river and the humidity and all that. Anytime we get above 65, it's pretty hard on the birds. But if you can stay at 65 and below, at least here, they do real well. Yeah,
Hey, you know
but
what?
there's a lot of factors.
Yeah. Hey, and you know what you are? You're a black belt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of good successful flyers here have success in other different hobbies and stuff like that. You got like Mark Ritter, he's a pool champion, he plays
Is that
pool.
right? Carl Hardesty was a good pool player too. Do you know that?
Oh, is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, Ray, have you ever gotten karate kicked by a World Cup champion? I did it. I remember I was trying to test him out, see if he really knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't want to just get.
I was
I
sitting,
don't want to just get kicked.
yeah, I was sitting on the couch and I got up and said, let me see if you really know your stuff." And I went, and I don't know, he was so cool about it. He go and kicked me, and I was like, he sat me back down. Remember that on your living
Yeah,
room?
I do.
I was like, oh man.
Jerry, I was in that for. I quit doing that stuff a few years ago, but I spent 37 years in there. I got up to Shihan, which is seventh degree.
Wow.
Um, they even got a Hall of Fame. They got me in that, and I made the USA team for a minute, and I've sparred a couple of world champions. I've been in a movie. Uh, I've had a lot of fun with the martial arts. I've trained people that's won gold medal, bronze medal, silver medals overseas. Um, and hanging out with Chuck Norris, man, one day really made my day. That was a lot of fun. And Bill Superfoot Wallace, he's done 14 movies. I hung out with him. There was a guy named Jeff Smith out of England was a world champion. I got to hang out with him, spar with him a little bit. And that's a fascinating world. And I know your boys are into martial arts. How they doing with that?
Oh, they're
Having
good.
fun doing it?
Yeah, my son just a few weeks ago got gold in California, a big tournament they had over there. So
Good deal.
he
Good
got
deal.
gold, yeah, for his weight class. But yeah, that's good.
Hey,
Huh?
speaking of fighting, Mike Tyson's going to fight this Jake Paul, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's causing a lot of talk. But I was thinking, I think he's doing that like 2 months prior to the convention. It would be cool if we could get Mike Tyson to come hang out. I heard he got some birds from overseas, some big time birds. So it looks like he might be wanting to compete. Be pretty cool if he'd come hang out at the convention, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it would be.
that's what
It
I
would be
heard too.
fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be nice, man. But yeah, and not only you're like a mixed martial arts or karate, kung fu, I don't know what exactly, but you're also a dog trainer, right?
Yeah, I trained dogs for years. Yeah, obedience and attack work. Did that for a long time,
Yeah.
and got away from that. You know, after a while, you just get tired of hearing the dogs barking.
Are you
But
are you
pigeons, I don't think I could ever get away from the pigeons.
you still writing that book from the dog training?
I did start on it, but I you know, I think I'll wait a while after I retire next year and sit down and do it. I'm still caught up into these birds, and Gabriel going out to his house and watching the birds and compete, trying to raise mine. And, you know, I went through that same thing that you went through, that sickness twice, and set me way back. And then I had a dog. A dog hit me, come over and knocked me out of about 40 birds about 2 months ago. And if it's been that long, it might not even have been 2 months. I think it's been about a month. Yeah, a dog come over and got me, went underneath and clipped off their legs, you know.
Oh man.
So it set me way back. But I shook it off. I brought some carpenters in to fix everything where that can't happen again, and just tried to get past it. But it did set me back. I'm wanting to get some birds that look pretty decent for the convention when these guys come. So I think I'll be okay. I got enough time. I should be able to put up a team that would look pretty decent.
What days are the convention for those that they're gonna watch this and maybe want to participate, take a trip over there?
Okay. Convention, of course, they're at the Marriott in Columbus, and it's the 12th through the 15th. The 12th will be on a Thursday. The 15th will be on a Sunday. Check-ins are Thursdays at 3 o'clock. Checkouts are Sunday at 12 o'clock. The first day on Saturday, let's see, no, the first day on Friday, I believe it's Friday, 6 in the morning, they'll load up on the bus, and we're going to go see five flyers. Mm-hmm. Then on the second day, we're going to see 4 flyers. But in the middle of that, on the second day, at Gabriel's house, we're going to have an auction, and we're going to eat there also. On the first day, I believe it's the first day when we do the 5, one of the guys is a chef. He's going to make up something really cool for everybody to eat. So between the eating and the bird flying and the auction, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good time. It's looking like, from best I can tell right now, we going to have about 3 buses and about 150 guys so far. 150 people involved. Yeah, so it should be a good convention. I think the T-shirts are set, the hats, and all that. But if you haven't got your room, I think they're running about $106 if I remember correctly, about $106 a night. And if you haven't done that, probably ought to do that. I don't know how many extra rooms they're going to have. He had to go back in there once or twice to get some extra rooms because it kind of blowed up real fast, a little faster, I think, than he thought. Should be a real good turnout. If I'm not mistaken, he said we haven't had 3 bus loads for 2 or 3 conventions back, you know. Mm-hmm. So this ought to be a real big one. I've seen a lot of big names that's going to be coming. And I'm excited about it. I want to have everybody, when they get over at my house, if they would, I want to get everybody's autograph. Then I'm going to get a picture of everybody and put it right in the middle of all those, and I'm going to hang it in my loft. That's just something I want to do. Yeah. Nice. Ray, will you be coming around?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I got my room as soon as you guys mentioned it. So
me too.
Well,
I didn't waste any time.
I want to get your autograph when you come over here. You guys got any other questions, like on type or feeding or anything else?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the current. You still have the same family, right? You still.
No, years ago, I got into Monson birds pretty heavy. Tom Monson, really, really good birds. I was going to compete against Bobby Bradley. I wanted to beat Bobby Bradley really bad. He had the highest score in the world for a while. And then I met him at Carl Hardesty's house. Have you ever met Bobby Bradley? Did you ever meet him before?
I have.
Wonderful guy. Wonderful guy.
Yes.
For some reason, he liked me and I liked him. We talked on the phone once or twice a week for probably the last 3 years he was alive. And he says, why don't you come out and help me grade my birds? And I never heard that term before. It's a grade them. He said, yeah, I want to evaluate them and I want you to help me. And I said, okay. So I drove 6 hours, went over to Bobby's house, and we evaluated these birds. But I noticed at Bobby's house, he had like all jackanet birds, went back to this guy named Ellis McDonald. When Ellis hooked him up, he said, now, here's your breeders, and here's how I think you should mate them. Well, Bobby did that and was kicking butt with them. But when Bobby had some really good working birds over there, and I said, Bobby, breed out of some of these babies. He said, no, as long as I'm getting what I'm getting out of them breeders, I'm just going to leave them the same way. But anyway, I got a little bit off track. I really like Bobby. I could talk about Bobby for a while. Anyhow, I had some Monson birds. I wanted to get some new birds. So I got to looking on Earl's list. Was you ever on that, Ray, on Earl's list?
Yeah, I was for a while, yeah.
There was a couple writers on there that I really liked reading their stuff. One of them was Ken Easley, and another one was Tom Monson.
Yeah.
Mostly because they talked about wing style. Axle, low X, high X, H, high H, and most guys wasn't talking that, but them two guys were. And they were pure Pinson birds that they had. It goes back to Bill. So I hit Tom up and asked him if he'd sell me some birds. And he said, yeah, I ended up buying like 3 different teams off of him. And then I would raise out of them. Man, they was just super. Well, me and Bobby would be talking back and forth on the phone. And how you doing today? I said, well, I got 32 breaks today. We still had some time to go before the qualifiers. And how'd you do? He said, well, I got 33. So we was kind of neck and neck, And it was a beautiful day. And I, to this day, do not know why, never did figure it out. But when it was time to come down, they didn't come down. They flew away and I never seen them again.
Wow.
Yeah, it was devastating. So I got another team together and throwed them up, and there really weren't that much. I think that year Kevin Monroe was judging that year. And that was the best I could come up with after I lost that team, and it was a hell of a team. So anyway, I really liked the Monson birds. Well, later on, I was talking to Ken Easley, and he said, hey, man, really got some good birds up here. And he says, for X amount of dollars, he said, I'll hook you up. And I said, all right, let's do that. So I got some Easley birds, and I flew them a few years. They were good. And then I liked them so well. Where'd you get these? He said, well, I got them off of Jay Starley. I said, okay. Well, later on, I wanted to hit Easley up for some more birds. He said, well, I got out of the rollers. He said, I'm just into the homers now. I said, well, what'd you do with your birds? He said, well, I gave them back to Jay Starley. I said, well, if you would, call Jay, tell him I'd like to get some of them birds. And he said, well, I will. And he did. He called him up and said, everything's cool. Give Joe a call. So I called Joe. I talked to Joe for a little while. And I'm into these solid blacks. And I said, Joe, I said, what I'm after is anything that you got that are solid black. And if you don't have enough solid blacks, I'll take blue checkers. And he said, well, as luck would have it, that's what I got, mostly black and blue. So we made a deal on a team. And I didn't know he was sick, but he died. I never did get the birds. No. Well, in the meantime, we had a local guy here that was going out because he's older, and he hooked me up with some of his birds. And then, of course, Gabriel got back in, and I ended up with some of Gabriel's birds. Then I ended up with some Hardesty birds. I'm trying to think of that. Bob Bettis, some of his birds that went through Gabriel. And I ended up with some Ritter birds that went through Gabriel that I got. So I have a whole mixture, but saying that, when I won the world championship, I had a mixture then too. So it's just a matter of, getting them in shape, picking the right ones. But I got some good genetics to work with, but they're all not one family or anything like that, which has never really been necessary for me. I remember when I first started getting into these birds when I came back from Texas in my early 20s. I was teaching martial arts then. And I was talking to a guy one day, and he says he had pigeons. And I got to talk to him, where'd you get your pigeons? He said, well, every year, all these guys that live in your area, he said, they thin out. They say, well, I'm keeping these, then I'm letting all them go. And he said, I made a deal with them where I go around every year and I get the birds that they don't want. And I said, well, I tell you what, if I'll make you a deal, if you go around and you get all them birds, because I knew the guys he was talking about. I said, you go around and get all them birds, I'll trade you karate lessons for the birds. And he said, okay. So I took them birds, thinking that they probably missed something. And I was right. They missed a lot. I got them birds back. I got them birds back in shape. And we had a competition. I beat them with their own birds. Oh, you talk about mad. Well, they never did let that guy go. I knew I couldn't get him, but they never did let that guy go back and get any of their leftovers. What they did. A lot of guys will thin out, man, a little bit too quick. It'll give the birds a chance,
Yeah.
But I'm notorious for working with damn near everything. All my stuff has never been the same. It's always been a mixture. Yeah.
Excited.
And you know what? Also, I gotta give you props on your loft too, man. That's a nice loft you got put together right there, and I could be in that thing all day long, man.
It's really comfortable. I had fly boxes, and I'd go out there and it'd be raining. I'd try to keep the rain out of my feed trays and try not to get too wet and try to hurry, and it'd be dark and trying to beat the dark. And I talked to Gabriel one day, and what are you doing? And I said, I went out to feed my birds, and I said, wind, you wouldn't believe the wind. I turned right into the wind. It blowed me down and right into the mud. And I said, I cut my arm and I spilled all my feed. And I said, it was a couple of days later, he pops up and he says, I'm going to build you a birdhouse where you don't have to stand outside. He said, I'm going to get you a birdhouse however you want it. He said, you draw it, I'll build it. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. So I drawed it and he built it, and I love it in there. Man, it can be storming and the wind blowing and snow and all this, and I'm real comfortable in there, and I got my lights, and it's pretty cool. I like it too, Jerry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had a guy in there the other day. He comes over about once a week named Mike Baker, and he was bragging on the loft. Man, I really like your loft. I get a lot of compliments on it, but Gabriel built that all by himself. I'd stand there and hand him the nails because I don't know how to do that stuff. I called him a one-man army. He liked that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna have you're gonna have 150 people in that thing all at once.
I know. I hope they don't open no doors.
Yeah.
I should be okay. But did I answer the question? I almost forgot what it was again.
Yeah, you did. We
Okay.
were asking about the family, if you still had the same family of birds.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a mix. Yeah, I get a little long-winded. I lose track of where I was sometime, but yeah, okay, good. If I don't answer one of your questions, remind me.
Well, John, we've been here for a little bit already, and we just
you're cutting me loose, aren't you? You call this an interview?
No, well, you know what? Listen,
I'm just playing. Yeah.
You know what? You've done a great job, man, and you haven't skipped a beat, man. I'm glad I found you and got to know you, and you know what, got to go out there and meet you, and that's one of the things that, it's a dream come true for me, is go out and meet people and in this hobby. And I want to say thank you, man, for giving some time to get to know me, man. I
Well,
appreciate you.
you're a pleasure. I always liked your personality, and you got a lot of gumption, and you're sincere, and that's what I seen in you. You're just very sincere what you're doing. At the same time, I'd like to thank you for all the other bird guys,
Yeah,
because if it wasn't for you, they wouldn't have got to see how all these other bird guys are and what they do. And I'm sure they have learned from all these videos. I've watched a lot of your videos, and every one that I see, there's something in there that I think, man, that's a pretty good idea. I never thought of that.
yeah,
So you've been a really big plus for our hobby, and we all thank you too, Jerry. So we
yeah.
really do. And Ray, I appreciate you assisting on
Yeah.
these things, because between the both of you seem to get the most and the best out of these guys.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, it's fun. Like I told you earlier, you, these days it's easier to talk to people, easier to meet people. The internet has its downfalls and it has its pluses. I guess
Yeah.
like anything. And I really enjoy meeting guys like you, John. I mean, we've never met before. I know you. I know your book.
Yeah.
I've seen your videos. So to get to talk to you person to person, it's a great thing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, the
And
social media, I think, has really helped us. If a guy is really serious and wants to do well with enough
yes,
social media, there's no way in the world he's not going to get the information that he needs, especially too between you two guys. Now, there's other guys doing it, but you guys got a real knack for getting the information out of a guy and making him feel
Yeah,
comfortable at the same
yeah.
time. So that's a big plus.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a hard start, because it's pretty sketchy and people didn't want to open up. But once certain people came out and felt the comfort, that you have more people,
Yeah, if you can make them feel
operating.
comfortable. I remember the first time you was here and you wanted me to go live. I'd never went live before. Now, when I was shooting videos, I had control. I was the
Uh-huh.
director. If I didn't like it, I could say stop,
Yeah,
cut,
yeah,
rewind. We're going to shoot it again.
yeah,
But
yeah,
when you go live, you can't do that going live. See, and
yeah,
that really it messes with your head a little bit. So
yeah.
yeah,
And
if you can make them feel comfortable.
yeah, I want to apologize to those guys that are gonna see this. We meant to go live. I had to do an update on one of the programs that I used to go live, and for some reason it wasn't letting me stream. So I'm gonna go ahead and post this right now and on YouTube. And is there anything you would like to say, a word to anybody out there, newbies or people in the hobby that's trying to figure things out? Any good words that you like to share?
Well, basically, don't listen to everybody. Do listen to them, but you can't listen to everything they say. You got to filter through. Some of it, it's not worth listening to, and some of it is. Get in there and figure out what's going to work for you. You have a different birds, you have a different environment, uh, a different mentality on what you're trying to do with your birds. So just main thing is enjoy your birds. Don't pay attention to this side stuff, negativity and this and that. Get out there and enjoy your birds. You don't have to compete, but if you want to compete, there's a good way of going about it. Listen to the guys that's doing well. Try to do what they do, and if it don't work for you, pick another guy that's doing well. Try to do what he does. Eventually, you'll find your spot. But the bottom line is, we come from all walks of life. These birds, with some of us, is all we have in common. So let's use that and be friends and have fun and be nice to each other and enjoy your pigeons.
Yeah,
Uh,
big
that's
time.
basically what I wanted to say. Just enjoy your birds.
Yeah,
And if you really want to do it, if you put the time in, it'll come back to you.
yeah, yeah. And then that's what we're trying to do with with what we're doing here, is to put out something good content for people to learn from. And yes, you have these people with negativity and coming up on social media talking about how these things are boring and no good content out of it. And I mean, let's not listen to that negativity. What I mean? Let's just keep it positive and keep on going, man. So thank you so much, John. What I mean? Yeah, it's a pleasure having you, and can't wait to go out there and hang out with you for the convention, man. September, eh? I'm excited.
Yeah. Hey, I am too. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. I'm looking forward to seeing Ray. And you guys, appreciate you having me on. I hope it was enlightening to somebody. And I'm glad that you liked the book, and a lot of other people like the book. It's been a real pleasure for you having me on, Jerry. I
You
appreciate
haven't
it.
had it, have a copy yet? Go out and get it. John, we even signed it for you at the convention, right, John?
I sure will. I sure will.
Take a picture
Yeah.
with you holding your book, man.
Mhm.
You know, I made it out here with the World Cup champ and feel like how I felt, you know, be proud, you know, you made it out there. So thank you. If you guys
Yeah.
haven't got one, go get a copy. And where could you get the copy at? A copy of this book?
Well, right now, you can get them through the MBRC bookstore. They're a little bit more expensive than Amazon or Noble. What's that, Brian? And what's that Noble place called? Yeah, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. But if you want to support the MBRC, I would suggest you get it through the MBRC. It costs a few dollars more, but of course, we need the money to make things operate as good as we got it. You know, all that little extra, like the auctions and things like that. The support for the MBRC helps us do what we got to do. So, yeah, you can get them through the MBRC.
Nice. If Gina and Wendy, they're listening, can't wait to see you guys in September.
Okay, I got my earbud in, so they can't hear you, but I'll tell them they're here. They're in the front room.
All right, sounds good. Then thank you, John. Thank you, Ray. And then to the next one, I guess, you know what I'm saying?
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, Ray. Okay, Ray. Nice meeting you, man.